Your liver can be 30% fat before you feel a single symptom. Today, we aren't just giving you a list of foods, we're giving you the biological code to reverse fat storage. This video is built around one promise: 10 foods to cleanse a fatty liver and the one rule that actually fixes the root cause. I'll explain why each food works in plain language and how to use them to stop the silent damage before it's too late. First, why this matters. Fatty liver, medically termed non-alcoholic fatty liver disease when alcohol isn't the primary cause, is extremely common. It's not just about alcohol. The most consistent driver we see is excess fuel arriving at the liver, calories, especially from added sugars and fructose, and a metabolic environment that keeps insulin chronically elevated. When the liver is repeatedly flooded with glucose and fructose, or when insulin prevents the liver from burning fat, the organ stores fat. Over time, that storage creates inflammation and metabolic stress. The good news is that if you reduce that fuel load, the liver's own metabolism and repair pathways can begin to recover. Foods help by supporting those pathways, but they're not magic. They only work if you stop the ongoing overload. Before we go into the 10 foods, a short myth-busting primer so you're focused on what matters. Salt is often blamed for liver problems, but sodium isn't a main driver of fat accumulation in the liver. It affects blood pressure and fluid balance, not fat storage in the same direct way as sugar and fructose. Saturated fat gets demonized in headlines, yet in many contexts, saturated fat is not the automatic villain for fatty liver. The metabolic context, high insulin and excess calories, is the more important factor. And finally, beware of the superfood narrative. No single food will reverse fatty liver while you continue to drink sugary beverages, binge on refined carbs, or drink heavily. Think of these foods as tools that support the liver's cleanup crew, but you must stop feeding the fire for the cleanup to be effective. I have listed these 10 foods and simple swaps in the description below so you can check them anytime. Now let's go through the 10. Eggs. Eggs are one of the most efficient whole food sources of choline and certain B vitamins. Choline is important because the liver packages fat into very low-density lipoprotein, VLDL, particles to export it. Without enough choline, that export process becomes inefficient and fat stays trapped in liver cells. Practical tip: aim for 1 to 2 whole eggs most days, ideally from pasture-raised sources if that's accessible. You get choline and B12 in the yolk that support fat handling and methylation pathways tied to detoxification. Quality red meat in moderation. When we talk about nutrients that support the liver, heme iron, zinc, and sulfur-containing amino acids, like methionine and cysteine, are significant because they feed glutathione production, the liver's primary antioxidant and detox molecule. That said, quality and context matter. Lean, minimally processed red meat, eaten as part of a lower sugar, lower refined carb pattern, can provide bioavailable nutrients without the inflammatory additives found in ultra-processed products. Practical tip: choose grass-fed or well-sourced cuts when possible, and keep portions sensible. Think palm-sized servings a few times a week rather than large daily steaks. Cruciferous vegetables. Broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, kale, and similar vegetables contain glucosinolates and sulfur compounds that support phase 2 liver detox pathways, which conjugate and help remove certain toxins and byproducts. They also provide fiber and relatively low calorie volume, which helps with satiety and moderating total energy intake. Practical tip: steam or roast crucifers if raw versions cause gas, and aim for a cup or more several times per week. Omega-3 fats, EPA, DHA. Long-chain omega-3 fatty acids found in oily fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, and in high-quality supplements are associated with lower liver fat and reduced inflammation in many studies. Mechanistically, EPA and DHA can help improve hepatic insulin sensitivity and shift liver metabolism away from fat synthesis toward burning. Practical tip: try to include oily fish 2 times a week or consider a reputable fish oil supplement if you don't eat fish. Speak with your clinician about dosing appropriate for you. Nuts, especially walnuts and macadamias. Nuts are calorie-dense but low in refined carbs, and they provide healthy fats, micronutrients, and satiety that can blunt post-meal insulin spikes. Walnuts, in particular, include plant-based omega-3 precursors and beneficial polyunsaturated fats, while macadamias are higher in monounsaturated fat and tend to be well tolerated for blood sugar control. Practical tip: A small handful, about an ounce, as a snack can replace a carb-heavy option like crackers or a muffin. Coffee. Coffee consumption has one of the most consistent epidemiologic associations with lower risk of fatty liver and slower disease progression. The exact mechanisms aren't fully nailed down, but coffee appears to influence inflammatory signaling, antioxidant systems, and liver enzyme markers. Importantly, this is about plain coffee. Sugar-laden lattes and sweetened drinks erase the benefit. Practical tip: if you tolerate coffee, 2 to 3 cups a day without added sugar is a reasonable target. Decaf also appears to offer some benefits if caffeine is an issue. Oats in minimally processed form. Whole oats bring soluble fiber, beta-glucans, and slow-burning carbohydrates that can improve satiety and blunt postprandial glucose spikes compared with refined grains. They're still a starch, so portion and processing matter. Instant oat packets with added sugar are not the same as steel-cut or rolled oats. Practical tip: choose intact or steel-cut oats. Keep portions to about a half cup cooked or so if you're insulin resistant, and pair with protein or fat to reduce insulin response. Legumes and beans. Beans, lentils, and chickpeas are higher in fiber and protein than refined grains, and may be a better option for many people. They can improve glycemic control in some trials and provide B vitamins and minerals. That said, when insulin resistance is severe, any concentrated carbohydrate, including legumes, can raise blood sugar and insulin if eaten in large amounts. Practical tip: test tolerance by including modest servings, a half cup cooked, paired with protein and non-starchy vegetables. If your blood sugar rises a lot after legumes, scale back and prioritize non-starchy vegetables and protein. Stable saturated and minimally processed cooking fats, butter, tallow, lard, and coconut oil are relatively stable for cooking, compared with many refined seed and vegetable oils. The concern with seed oils is oxidation during processing and high heat cooking, which may produce oxidized lipids. Those oxidized compounds are what we worry about more than the mere presence of fatty acids. Using stable fats can reduce the amount of oxidized lipids consumed and help you feel fuller between meals. Practical tip: use butter or ghee for moderate heat cooking, tallow for higher heat searing, and limit frequent use of highly processed seed oils in packaged foods. Leafy greens and sulfur-rich greens beyond crucifers. Spinach, Swiss chard, arugula, collards. These provide vitamins, minerals, and sulfur-containing compounds that support phase 2 detox and supply low-calorie bulk that displaces refined carbohydrates. Greens also add magnesium, which many people are low in and which is important for insulin sensitivity. Practical tip: make greens the base of many meals. Large salads, blended into smoothies with low fruit ratios, or sautéed alongside protein. Berries and low-fructose fruit in moderation. Whole fruits differ from fruit juices and dried fruit because of fiber and lower concentration of free fructose. Berries are lower in fructose per serving and bring antioxidants and fiber that support metabolic health. High fructose foods like fruit juices, many dried fruits, and sweetened smoothies, however, can push fructose load quickly. Practical tip: prioritize berries and whole citrus in reasonable portions, half to 1 cup. Avoid fruit juices and be cautious with dried fruit and high fructose tropical fruits if you have high insulin or significant fatty liver. Those are the 10 foods I want you to know. Eggs, quality red meat in moderation, cruciferous vegetables, omega-3s, nuts, especially walnuts and macadamias, coffee, minimally processed oats, legumes and beans, conditional, stable saturated minimally processed cooking fats, and leafy greens plus low fructose fruits like berries. Each contributes something tangible: choline for export of fat, sulfur amino acids for glutathione, anti-inflammatory omega-3s to improve liver metabolism, fiber and low glycemic carbs to reduce insulin spikes, and so on. Now let me be very clear. Adding all 10 of these foods to your plate won't reverse fatty liver if you keep pouring in excess calories from added sugars, drinking heavily, or eating a steady stream of refined starches and fried foods made in oxidized seed oils. That brings us to the single most important rule. The one rule to fix fatty liver: reduce hepatic fuel and chronic insulin exposure. Put simply, stop repeatedly feeding the liver more calories than it can manage, especially from sources that promote liver fat creation. Alcohol and fructose are top offenders here, along with refined carbohydrates and frequent snacking that keeps insulin elevated. Insulin signals the liver to store fat and inhibits fat burning. When insulin is chronically high, the liver cannot effectively mobilize stored fat. Reduce that signal, and the liver can begin to burn and export stored fat again. The foods we just discussed help support that process, but they cannot overcome ongoing fuel overload. How to put the one rule into action. Practical, immediate steps you can start this week. First, eliminate or dramatically reduce added sugars and high fructose items. This means cutting out soda, fruit juices, sugary sports drinks, and most commercial sweets. Be especially cautious with sweetened yogurts, sauces, and healthy smoothies that hide sugars. Fructose is processed preferentially by the liver and pushes de novo lipogenesis, the pathway where the liver converts sugar into fat. Removing these sources is the single most powerful dietary action for reducing hepatic fuel. Second, limit alcohol. Alcohol is processed by the liver and adds a direct fuel and stressor. Even if someone's fat accumulation was non-alcoholic in origin, alcohol can still worsen liver inflammation and slow recovery. Reducing or removing alcohol gives the liver space to repair. Third, reduce refined carbohydrates and highly processed foods, especially those cooked in oxidized seed oils. White bread, pastries, chips, and many packaged snacks are high in refined starches and often cooked in industrial seed oils. These products combine refined carbs and oxidized fats, a double hit for insulin and oxidative stress. Swap these out for whole food options, protein and non-starchy vegetables, nuts, eggs, and minimally processed grains like steel-cut oats in sensible portions. Fourth, time your meals and prioritize protein with each meal. Eating protein and some stable fats with meals blunts glucose and insulin spikes, which helps lower the liver's insulin exposure. Deliberate meal structure, rather than constant grazing, supports lower average insulin across the day. Fifth, choose stable fats for cooking and reduce exposure to overly processed seed and vegetable oils. These seed oils can be consumed in large quantities through industrial foods. The issue isn't that they contain polyunsaturated fat per se, but that processing and repeated high-heat frying can produce oxidized lipids that promote inflammation. Practical swaps include using olive oil for dressings and gentle cooking, butter or ghee for moderate heat, and tallow for high-heat searing. Let's walk through some realistic examples of swaps so you know exactly how to apply this in the kitchen. Replace a bagel with a plate of scrambled eggs and sautéed greens. Swap a sugary sports drink for black coffee or sparkling water with a squeeze of lemon. Replace a fast food French fries meal with grilled fish, a side of roasted cruciferous vegetables, and a small portion of steel-cut oats or beans. Replace that nightly ice cream bowl with a cup of berries and a tablespoon of nuts. These are not restrictive in the sense of deprivation. They are targeted swaps that reduce hepatic fuel and keep you satisfied. I also want to address a few commonly asked technical points without getting lost in jargon. De novo lipogenesis is the process by which the liver converts excess carbohydrates, particularly fructose, into fat. VLDL is how the liver exports fat out to the bloodstream. Choline helps with VLDL formation and transport, which is why choline-rich foods like eggs are relevant. Hepatic insulin resistance simply means the liver is less responsive to insulin's normal function of suppressing glucose production and allowing fat burning. Chronically high insulin contributes to this state. These are mechanistic terms that explain why cutting excess sugar and calories matters more than demonizing any one fat on your plate. What about saturated fat? Should you avoid it? Context matters. In a diet already overloaded with sugars and refined carbohydrates, large amounts of saturated fat may compound metabolic disturbances. But in a lower carb or lower sugar context, moderate amounts of stable saturated fats like butter, coconut oil, or tallow used for cooking can be acceptable and even useful for satiety. The key is not to treat saturated fat in isolation, but to consider the overall pattern. Is the diet high in added sugars and refined carbs? If so, reducing those carbohydrates takes priority. How quickly should you expect to see change? Be realistic. Metabolic repair is gradual. You may notice improvements in energy, appetite, and some lab markers in a few weeks, but imaging evidence of reduced liver fat often takes several months of consistent changes. That's not a reason to give up early. Consistent reduction in hepatic fuel and better insulin control are what drive meaningful improvement. 3 immediate action steps to start this week. 1. Remove sugary drinks. Replace them with water, coffee, or unsweetened tea. This alone removes a concentrated source of fructose and simple sugar that floods the liver. 2. Add 2 of the key supportive foods into your routine. For example, include eggs at breakfast and a serving of oily fish or a fish oil supplement twice a week. and make cruciferous vegetables part of 2 dinners this week. 3. Swap packaged snacks cooked in seed oils for a handful of nuts or a hard-boiled egg, and cook at home using butter or olive oil instead of industrial seed oils. If you're insulin resistant or on medications for blood sugar, talk with your clinician before making big dietary shifts, because reducing carbohydrate intake or changing medications requires professional oversight. Also, if you're pregnant or have other medical conditions, check with your healthcare provider before starting supplements or significant dietary changes. A few closing reminders so you finish with clarity and compassion. First, these foods are supportive. They help the liver's pathways for export, antioxidant protection, and reducing inflammation, but they are not isolated cures. The one rule, reduce hepatic fuel and chronic insulin exposure, is the behavioral pivot that allows these foods to do their work. Second, be patient and consistent. Changes to diet and meal structure tend to show cumulative benefits over weeks to months. Third, small sustainable swaps beat dramatic yo-yo changes. If you can remove sugary drinks, prioritize whole food proteins, include eggs and cruciferous vegetables, and choose stable cooking fats, you've already done the heavy lifting. To recap, the 10 foods to support a fatty liver are eggs, quality red meat in moderation, cruciferous vegetables, omega-3 rich fish or supplements, nuts, especially walnuts and macadamias, coffee, minimally processed oats, legumes and beans where tolerated, stable saturated or minimally processed cooking fats, and leafy greens plus low fructose fruits like berries. And the one rule that actually fixes the process is to reduce hepatic fuel and chronic insulin exposure, primarily by cutting added sugars and fructose, limiting alcohol, scaling back refined carbs, and avoiding frequent snacking that keeps insulin high. I have listed all 10 foods and the essential liver lab tests in the description below, so you can check them anytime. Like and subscribe for more liver health strategies, and if this video helped you, share it with someone who's been told they have fatty liver but isn't sure where to start. Small changes, done consistently, give the liver the space it needs to heal.